Far across the stars, on a once thriving planet known as Kerrith, a civilization had been slowly dying. The people of Kerrith had long been known for their wisdom and incredible technology. Their cities were built on towering spires of glass and metal, their skies filled with sleek ships that flew like birds of prey. But now, all that remained was silence. For decades, the Kerrithians had sent out desperate signals to any and all nearby civilizations, hoping for aid. But their calls went unanswered. Powerful galactic empires, who had once traded with them and admired their advancements, had turned their backs. The Kerrithians were seen as a failed race, their once glorious home now a place of disease, famine, and decay. The Kerrithians had once believed that they were part of something grand, a galactic community that would help them grow and prosper. But now, they were alone. It seemed that every powerful race in the galaxy had decided they were no longer worth saving. Their planet had been struck by an aggressive, unstoppable plague that drained the life from their population, leaving entire cities abandoned. The soil, once fertile and rich, had become barren. Crops withered, and the oceans turned murky and lifeless. The Kerrithians, once the shining star of the galaxy, now only clung to life by a thread. But despite all the hardships, there was still hope. In the quietest corner of their world, a signal was being sent, a single message, repeating over and over again, across the vast emptiness of space. "Help us. We are Kerrith. Please, help." In the midst of this, on a ship in the outer reaches of the galaxy, a human named Captain Michael Hawk was listening. He had been assigned to investigate unknown signals that had recently been detected by his ship's sensors. He had heard many strange things on his travels, but nothing like this. A dying planet, a lost civilization, and a cry for help from a race who had been abandoned by everyone they had once known. As Hawk stared at the screen in front of him, he felt a strange pull. He was a seasoned explorer, used to solving problems and finding answers, but this felt different. There was something about the Kerrithians' message that seemed personal. His heart tightened as he read the words again. "They need help. They're asking for help, and no one is listening," he muttered to himself. A silence fell over the room as he sat back in his chair. His mind raced with possibilities. What if they were the last hope for this lost race? Could humans truly make a difference in a galaxy that had already given up on them? Hawk made up his mind. He would go to Kerrith. He would offer them the one thing they had been denied, a chance at survival. The journey to Kerrith had begun. It was unclear what awaited them on that distant, dying world. But one thing was certain: the humans would not ignore them. Not this time. Captain Michael Hawk's ship, the Astra, cut through the cold emptiness of space as it made its way to the distant planet of Kerrith. The long journey felt even longer as Hawk sat alone in the command center, staring at the flickering light of the star maps. His mind kept returning to the same question. What would they find when they reached Kerrith? The signal they had intercepted had come from a deep region of the galaxy. Most ships avoided this part of space, as it was known to be unstable and dangerous. But that didn't matter to Hawk. He had taken on difficult missions before, and this one felt different. It felt like something important, something he couldn't ignore. As the Astra neared the planet, the atmosphere around Kerrith looked anything but inviting. The once beautiful world was now clouded with gray storms, and the land below appeared desolate. Mountains that had once stood tall and proud now seemed worn and eroded. Oceans that once shimmered with life now appeared dark and lifeless. Hawk stared at the view screen in silence, trying to imagine what had happened to this planet. What had caused the downfall of such a great civilization? Approaching Kerrith, the navigator's voice broke through his thoughts. Activating orbital descent. The ship slowly descended through the thick clouds, breaking into the lower atmosphere. Hawk's eyes narrowed as he watched the barren surface come into focus. There were no cities, no signs of civilization, just abandoned ruins scattered across the land. Some parts of the planet seemed completely destroyed, while others looked as if they had simply been left behind. The ship landed with a soft thud on a barren plain, far from what remained of Kerrith's once great cities. The engines powered down, and the only sound was the soft hum of the life support system. Hawk opened the door and stepped onto the planet's surface. The air was thin and cold. The ground beneath his boots was cracked and dry, and the scent of dust filled the air. He pulled up his hood against the chill and looked around, taking in the lifeless landscape. A crackling sound came through his communicator. "This is Chief Engineer Zora," the voice said, sounding tense. "We've detected some movement not far from your location. It could be one of them, the Kerrithians." Hawk's heart skipped a beat. They weren't alone. He quickly made his way toward the source of the signal, his eyes scanning the horizon. As he moved closer to the source, a figure emerged from behind a crumbling building. It was tall, its skin an unusual shade of blue-gray, with sharp, angular features that suggested a long history of grace and wisdom. The figure stopped at the sight of Hawk, its eyes locking with his. The two stood still for a long moment, the silence heavy between them. The alien's expression was unreadable, but there was something in their gaze, a mixture of surprise, fear, and hope. The Kerrithian spoke, their voice soft but clear. "You came?" the alien asked, their voice breaking slightly. Hawk took a step forward, his voice steady. "I came. You're not alone anymore. We're here to help." The Kerrithian's eyes widened, and for the first time, a small smile tugged at the corner of their lips. It was the first sign of hope in a long time. Captain Michael Hawk watched the Kerrithian's reaction closely as the alien slowly approached him. The smile on the alien's face grew, but it was tinged with uncertainty. Hawk could see the hope in their eyes, but also the fear. After all, this wasn't just a simple rescue. It was the beginning of something much bigger. "You are human?" the Kerrithian asked again, as if trying to make sense of the reality before them. Hawk nodded, keeping his tone steady. "Yes, I'm Captain Michael Hawk. We came because your planet's distress signal reached us. You're not alone anymore. We're here to help." The Kerrithian's gaze softened, their eyes shimmering with unshed tears. For so long, they had begged for help, only to be ignored by everyone else in the galaxy. But now, here was a human, one person, offering them a chance at survival. "I am Nyra," the alien said, her voice trembling. "I speak for my people. We are the last of the Kerrithians. The plague has taken so many. I fear we will not last much longer." Hawk's heart tightened. He couldn't imagine what it must have been like to be in Nyra's position, to watch everything crumble around you, with no one to turn to. "Why did no one come to help?" Hawk asked, though he could guess the answer. Nyra shook her head slowly. "We were abandoned. Once, we were a proud race, respected by the galactic empires. But as our resources began to dwindle, and our world became harder to live on, we were seen as a burden. No one wanted to help. They left us to die." Hawk clenched his fists, a mix of anger and sadness rising within him. He couldn't understand how any civilization could simply turn its back on another, especially one that had once been so advanced. The Kerrithians had contributed to the galaxy in ways that many others had never even known, and yet they were discarded as if they were nothing. "This isn't right," Hawk muttered. "But I'm here now, and I'll make sure the others hear your plea. I'll make them listen." Nyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and disbelief. You would do that. You would speak for us. You would try to save us." Hawk nodded firmly. "Yes, we may be humans, and we may be small in comparison to the other powers out here, but we don't turn our backs on people in need. You're not alone anymore. Nyra, I promise." A moment of silence passed between them, the weight of their words hanging in the air. It wasn't just a promise to Nyra. It was a promise to herself, to her people, and to the future of the Kerrithians. Hawk turned toward his ship, his thoughts already racing. He knew he had a lot of work ahead of him, and convincing other galactic powers to help would be a challenge. But he wouldn't back down. He couldn't. The Kerrithians deserved a future, just like everyone else. "I'll make the call," Hawk said, his voice resolute, "and I'll make sure they listen." As he walked back to the Astra, Nyra watched him with renewed hope. For the first time in a long while, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, the Kerrithians could be saved. Back on the Astra, Captain Michael Hawk sat at his desk, staring at the communication screen. His mind raced as he prepared for what lay ahead. The journey to Kerrith had been just the first step. Now he had to convince the most powerful forces in the galaxy to help a race that had been abandoned by everyone else. His fingers hovered over the console. The first transmission he needed to send was to Earth's United Galactic Council. The council was made up of representatives from several human colonies spread across the stars, and they held great political power. Hawk knew it wouldn't be easy. "This is a risky move," he muttered to himself, before pressing the button to connect. The screen blinked to life, and the face of Counselor Alina Voss appeared. She was a strong-willed, no-nonsense leader who was known for her sharp mind and even sharper temper. Hawk had worked with her before, but he wasn't sure how she would react to this. "Captain Hawk," Alina said, her voice calm but skeptical. "What's this all about? I hope you have a good reason for disturbing me at this hour." Hawk leaned forward. "I do, Counselor. I've just come from Kerrith. The Kerrithians are in desperate need of help. Their planet is dying. They've been abandoned by every other galactic empire, and I'm asking for your support in bringing aid to them." Alina's eyes narrowed. The Kerrithians, the ones who let their resources dwindle and caused their own downfall. Why should we waste our resources on a race that couldn't help itself? Hawk took a deep breath. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. "I understand your concerns, but these are not just any aliens. The Kerrithians were once a powerful and respected civilization. They've contributed to the galactic community in ways that we can't even begin to understand. And now they're on the brink of extinction, with no one to help them." Alina was silent for a moment, considering his words. Hawk could tell she was trying to weigh the political and moral implications of the situation. "You're asking for a lot, Captain. The Council isn't known for supporting races that can't stand on their own 2 feet. We've got our own problems to deal with." "But they were abandoned," Hawk insisted. "They didn't ask for this. The galaxy turned its back on them when they needed help the most. If we don't do something now, they'll be gone. And with them, all their knowledge, all their history, lost forever." Alina's expression softened slightly, but she remained firm. "And what exactly do you expect the Council to do, Hawk?" "I'm asking for resources," Hawk replied. "Medical aid, food, and technology to help them rebuild. I want to reach out to other civilizations too, maybe convince them to help." Alina was quiet for a long moment. "I'll bring it to the Council for discussion. But I can't promise anything, Captain." Hawk nodded, though he knew it wouldn't be easy. "Thank you. That's all I ask." As the screen went black, Hawk leaned back in his chair, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. He had taken the first step, but now it was up to the rest of the galaxy. And as he thought about the Kerrithians, standing alone on their dying planet, he knew one thing for sure. He wouldn't stop until they got the help they deserved. Captain Michael Hawk stood on the Astra's bridge, watching the communication panel with growing impatience. The Council had taken longer than he expected to respond. But finally, they had agreed to offer limited support for the Kerrithians. It wasn't much, just a small convoy of ships with food, medical supplies, and engineers to assess the damage. But it was a start. Hawk had hoped for more, but at least they were willing to try. "Captain, the fleet is ready," the navigator, Lieutenant Grace, called out from her station. Hawk nodded, his mind already racing ahead. They were on their way back to Kerrith. The first shipment of aid was already loaded onto the ships, and now it was time to deliver it. The Kerrithians had been waiting for this moment for so long, and Hawk didn't want to let them down. As the fleet entered Kerrith's atmosphere, The once beautiful world was still shrouded in a blanket of gray clouds. The planet was far from the vibrant place it had once been, and there were no signs of the bustling cities that had marked the Kerrithians' civilization. But as Hawk's ship descended toward the surface, a familiar figure appeared in the distance. Nyra, the Kerrithian leader, stood waiting by a cluster of crumbling buildings. She was flanked by a small group of her people, all of them looking up at the ships with wide eyes. Hawk's heart swelled with emotion as he saw the hope in their gazes. When the ships landed, the cargo hold doors slowly opened, and a team of humans, including engineers and medical personnel, disembarked. They began unloading the supplies as Nyra and her people cautiously approached. "Welcome," Nyra said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "We never thought anyone would come." Hawk stepped forward, smiling. "It's just the beginning, Nyra. We're here to help rebuild. We're not leaving until we've done everything we can." The engineers immediately began to assess the damage to the planet's infrastructure. While the Kerrithians had once been highly advanced, the damage caused by the plague and years of neglect had left much of their technology in ruins. However, the human team quickly set to work, using their tools to repair what they could. Meanwhile, the medical team worked with Nyra and her people, offering treatments and medicines to those who had survived the plague. Hawk watched as Nyra spoke with the medical doctors, explaining the symptoms that had ravaged her people. Hawk knew this was just the start. The resources they had brought were only a temporary solution, and much more would need to be done to ensure the Kerrithians' survival. But seeing the hope in their eyes, the gratitude that was so clearly visible, made him believe that they could pull through. "Thank you," Nyra said quietly as she approached Hawk later that evening. "You've given us a chance when no one else would." Hawk smiled, a sense of fulfillment spreading through him. "It's the least we could do. You deserve a future." He knew that there were many challenges ahead. The road to recovery for the Kerrithians would be long and difficult, but with humans at their side, they weren't alone anymore. The aid they had brought was just the first step toward rebuilding their civilization. As the sun began to set on Kerrith's desolate landscape, Hawk looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. The Kerrithians had a chance now, thanks to the humans who had stepped in when no one else would. Days passed, and the relief effort on Kerrith continued. The human teams worked tirelessly to rebuild what they could, mending damaged technology, delivering food and medical aid, and helping the Kerrithians re-establish some sense of normalcy. The Kerrithians were beginning to show signs of recovery, their energy returning as they worked alongside the humans. Hope was finally starting to grow on the barren world. But not everything was as it seemed. Captain Michael Hawk had just finished a meeting with Nyra when he noticed something strange on the monitors in the Asterisk Command Center. One of the planet's distant regions, once a site of Kerrith's thriving cities, was now completely silent. It had been flagged as a potential source of future help, but Hawk had a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. "Lieutenant, check the communications grid again," Hawk ordered. "There's no signal from Sector 4. That area should be active by now." The lieutenant tapped a few buttons, her brow furrowing as she examined the data. "Captain, you're right. The grid's gone dark. It should be reporting back with updates from the repair teams there." Hawk's instincts told him something was off. Sector 4 had been a major hub for Kerrithian technology before the collapse. If it was failing to transmit data, it could mean trouble. "Prepare a team," Hawk said, his voice steady but urgent. "We're going there now." As the team suited up and boarded a shuttle, Hawk couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his gut. What could be causing the communications to go silent? Had something happened to the Kerrithian teams stationed there, or was there something more sinister at play? The shuttle flew across the desolate landscape, landing in the heart of Sector 4. As the doors opened, Hawk and his team stepped out into the cold, harsh winds. The area was eerily quiet. The Kerrithian buildings, once majestic and alive with activity, now stood in ruins, their structures cracked and covered in dust. Hawk's eyes scanned the surroundings carefully. The area appeared deserted. No Kerrithians, no humans, no sign of life. "Where is everyone?" Hawk muttered under his breath. The team moved cautiously through the area, searching for any clue that might explain the silence. Then suddenly, a faint sound echoed in the distance, something mechanical. It wasn't the hum of Kerrithian technology, but the unmistakable noise of weapons. They followed the sound, and as they turned a corner, they froze. A group of heavily armed aliens stood in the center of what had once been a bustling city plaza. They wore dark, reflective armor, and their eyes glowed with an unnatural light. These weren't Kerrithians. They were from another race, one Hawk had never seen before, but their presence made it clear that they were no friends of the Kerrithians. Before Hawk could react, one of the alien figures turned and spotted the team. Its lips curled into a menacing smile. "You've made a grave mistake coming here, human," the alien spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. "The Kerrithians were never meant to survive. And now, neither will you." Hawk's heart raced. It was clear now. This was no ordinary problem. The Kerrithians weren't just struggling with natural disasters. Someone had a deeper, more dangerous interest in their downfall. As the alien warriors advanced, Hawk knew that the fight for Kerrith's survival had just taken a terrifying new turn. Captain Michael Hawk's heart pounded in his chest as the alien warriors closed in, their dark armor gleaming under the harsh lights of the ruined Kerrithian city. The air seemed to grow thicker with every step they took. Hawk's team, caught off guard but not unprepared, quickly drew their weapons, forming a protective circle around him. "What do you want?" Hawk shouted, his voice steady despite the tension. He knew that the survival of the Kerrithians, and possibly the entire mission, depended on how this confrontation played out. The leader of the alien group, a towering figure with glowing eyes and a deep rasping voice, stepped forward. "What we want, human, is simple," the alien said. "The Kerrithians were never meant to survive. Their resources are ours now. Your interference is unwanted." Hawk's mind raced. These aliens weren't just here for conquest. They had a specific purpose. They were part of a bigger plan, one that seemed to involve wiping out the Kerrithians completely. It wasn't just a simple battle for survival. It was a fight for the control of an entire race. "Are you the ones responsible for the plague?" Hawk asked, his voice sharp. If they were the ones behind the devastation, it would change everything. The Kerrithians needed to know who their true enemies were. The alien leader laughed, a chilling sound that sent a shiver down Hawk's spine. "Plague? No, human. That was nature's hand. But we've seen the opportunity and we've taken it. The Kerrithians will fall, and the resources of this planet will belong to us." As the alien spoke, Hawk noticed movement in the shadows behind them. A small group of Kerrithians, their faces gaunt and tired but still determined, appeared from the ruins. They had seen the humans arrive and had come to fight. They weren't going to stand by while these invaders threatened their already broken world. One of the Kerrithians, a tall woman with silver-blue skin, stepped forward. "We will not surrender," she said in a defiant voice, her eyes locked on the alien leader. "We may have fallen, but we will fight. We will fight for what's left of our people." Hawk felt a surge of pride at the Kerrithians' words. They weren't giving up. They hadn't given up yet, and neither would he. He turned to his team. "Prepare for a fight," he ordered. "We can't let them take this world." A firefight erupted in an instant. The humans and Kerrithians, now united by a common enemy, fought side by side. The sound of blaster fire filled the air, and the once silent city was alive with chaos. Hawk ducked behind a fallen structure, his pulse racing as the alien forces advanced. But the Kerrithians weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to reclaim their future. As the battle raged on, Hawk saw something in their eyes: determination. They weren't just trying to protect their home. They were showing the galaxy that they weren't done yet. Hawk found his focus again. They had a chance. If they could hold their ground long enough, They could drive the invaders back and give the Kerrithians a fighting chance. The tide of the battle began to shift as the Kerrithians, emboldened by the support of the humans, fought with renewed strength. Hawk knew this was only the beginning. This enemy was not easily defeated, but it was a victory in the making. Together, they could protect Kerrith from any force that dared threaten it. The battle raged on for hours. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the ruined streets of Kerrith's once great cities. Captain Michael Hawk crouched behind a shattered wall, his heart pounding in his chest. The alien invaders were relentless, pushing forward with an almost terrifying determination. But the humans and Kerrithians fought side by side, refusing to give in. The tide of the battle had shifted in their favor, but it was still far from over. Hawk could see that his team and the Kerrithians were beginning to tire. The alien forces seemed endless, emerging from the shadows in wave after wave, but the unity between humans and Kerrithians had sparked something powerful. "Captain," Lieutenant Grace called out, running toward him, her face streaked with dirt and sweat. "We've got a problem. The enemy is regrouping. They've sent for reinforcements." Hawk's stomach twisted with worry. If more enemies arrived, they wouldn't be able to hold them off for much longer. The humans had brought only limited resources, and the Kerrithians, despite their strength, were still recovering from the plague. They didn't have the energy to fight forever. "We can't give up now," Hawk said, his voice firm. "We need to end this." Just then, Nyra, the Kerrithian leader, appeared at his side, her expression tense. She had been coordinating the defense efforts, but even she seemed to realize that time was running out. "We have a plan," Nyra said quickly. "The last of our hidden weapons caches are just outside the city. If we can get to them, we might stand a chance against their reinforcements." Hawk nodded. It was a long shot, but it was the best hope they had. "Lead the way," he said. The two of them, along with a small group of soldiers from both sides, began the dangerous trek through the city. The streets were littered with debris, and the distant sounds of the battle still echoed, but they had to focus. The alien reinforcements were on their way, and if they didn't get to the weapons first, it would be over. They moved quickly and quietly, staying in the shadows. The city had once been alive with activity, but now it was a ghost town. Every corner seemed like a potential danger, but Hawk and Nyra pressed on, determined to reach the weapons cache. As they reached the outskirts of the city, they saw the hidden entrance to an underground bunker. Nyra moved ahead, typing in a sequence on the keypad. The door slowly creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with weapons, high-tech blasters, armor, and explosives. "This is our last chance," Nyra said, her voice steady but urgent. "We use this to push them back." Hawk gave a quick nod. The battle had taken a heavy toll on both sides, but this was the moment. They could turn the tide, or they could lose everything. As they gathered the weapons, the distant sound of the approaching enemy grew louder. They didn't have much time. Hawk knew that this was their turning point. The decision to fight, to push forward despite the odds, would define their future. With weapons in hand, they began their march back toward the heart of the battle, ready to make their stand. The Kerrithians, once abandoned and broken, were now standing with the humans, fighting for the chance to survive. And Hawk knew that this fight, this alliance, would change everything. The sound of blaster fire faded as the last of the alien invaders retreated, their ranks broken by the united force of humans and Kerrithians. The battlefield lay quiet for the first time in hours, the only noise the distant hum of wind and the labored breaths of those who had fought so fiercely to protect their world. Captain Michael Hawk lowered his weapon, his body aching with exhaustion. He glanced around, taking in the scene. The ruins of the Kerrithian city, once a symbol of grandeur, were now a testament to the fight for survival. But despite the destruction, there was something else in the air, a feeling of accomplishment, of victory. "We did it," Lieutenant Grace said, her voice tired but filled with relief. She gave a tired smile as she looked around at the others who had fought. Some were injured, but they had survived. Hawk nodded, though his mind was already working ahead. The battle had been won, but the true work had only just begun. The Kerrithians, while still standing, had suffered greatly. Their civilization was in ruins, and they had lost so much. Rebuilding would take time, effort, and resources they didn't have in abundance. Nyra approached him, her silver-blue skin bruised but her spirit unbroken. Her eyes, once filled with doubt and fear, now shone with something new, hope. She had fought alongside Hawk and his team, and in doing so, she had shown her people that they weren't alone. They had allies, and together, they could rebuild. "Thank you, Captain," Nyra said, her voice filled with gratitude. "Without you, we would not have survived." Hawk gave a small, humble smile. "You fought just as hard as we did. We're in this together." As they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of battle, the first steps of recovery began. Kerrithian engineers worked alongside human scientists, assessing the damage and discussing how best to use the remaining resources to repair what had been broken. Medical teams tended to the wounded, offering treatments and care. Hawk watched as Nyra spoke with her people, giving them hope, offering them the strength to keep going. She had become more than just a leader. She had become a symbol of what could be achieved when two races worked together for a common goal. The Kerrithians had always believed they were alone, forgotten by the galaxy. But now, they had humans by their side, helping them rebuild, step by step. "We'll make it," Nyra said, as she stood next to Hawk. "It may take time, but we will rebuild. The Kerrithians are strong. We just need a chance to grow again." Hawk looked around at the team of humans and Kerrithians working together. It was clear that this was only the beginning, but the foundation had been laid. They had faced destruction and fear, but now they faced the future with determination. "This world has a future," Hawk said quietly, watching as the first seeds of recovery were planted. "And we'll be here to make sure it happens." Together, they could rebuild. Together, they could face whatever challenges the galaxy would throw at them. They had fought, they had won, and now they would build a future that neither the Kerrithians nor the humans could have imagined before. Weeks passed, and Kerrith began to show signs of life once more. The cities, though still scared from the battle and the plague, were slowly being repaired. The sky, once heavy with ash and dust, was beginning to clear. The Kerrithians worked tirelessly, their strength renewed by the presence of the humans who had come to their aid. In return, the humans were learning from the Kerrithians, gaining insight into a culture and history that had been nearly lost. Captain Michael Hawk stood on the edge of a rebuilt plaza, watching as humans and Kerrithians worked together, sharing ideas, tools, and knowledge. The atmosphere was different now, filled with purpose and hope. Nyra approached him, her silver-blue skin reflecting the warm light of the setting sun. Her expression was one of quiet determination, but there was also a sense of peace that hadn't been there before. "How are things going?" Hawk asked, his voice calm but curious. He'd been overseeing much of the recovery effort, but it was always important to check in with Nyra. She had been the heart of the Kerrithian resistance, and now she was the key to their future. "It's coming together," Nyra said, looking out at the bustling city. "It will take time, but we have hope again. We've never had hope like this before." Hawk nodded, his gaze turning to the Kerrithian workers who were now rebuilding homes, planting new crops, and re-establishing vital systems. There was a quiet sense of satisfaction in the air, like the first real signs of spring after a long, harsh winter. "You know," Nyra continued, her voice thoughtful, "I never imagined we would be here, rebuilding. I thought our race was finished. But with your help, we have a second chance." Hawk smiled, though the weight of their shared journey still lingered in his chest. "It wasn't just me, Nyra. It was all of us, humans and Kerrithians. We made this happen together." Nyra smiled back, her eyes soft with gratitude. "You're right. We did it together." They stood in silence for a moment, taking in the progress that had been made. The Kerrithians had once been an isolated and forgotten race, their cries for help unanswered by the rest of the galaxy. Now, with the help of the humans, they had begun to rise again. "The galaxy may have turned its back on us before," Nyra said quietly, "but now we're not alone. We have you, and I think we're ready to face whatever comes next." Hawk's heart swelled with pride as he looked at the Kerrithian people. They were strong, resilient, and now they had a future they would build with the humans by their side. The bond between the two species had grown stronger with every passing day. They had faced destruction together, but they had also built something new, something lasting. "We'll be here for you, Nyra," Hawk said, his voice firm with commitment. "As long as you need us, we'll be here." Nyra nodded, her expression one of quiet determination. "And we'll be here for you, Captain. Always." Together, humans and Kerrithians looked to the horizon, ready to face the challenges of the future. It was a future they would build together, side by side. A future that was no longer defined by abandonment or isolation, but by unity and hope. And for the first time in a long time, the Kerrithians could see a path forward, a future full of possibilities.